Good morning. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're excited to welcome back Dr. Jennifer Madden from Leverage Point Development. This is the Strategic Planning Fundamentals training. There is also a part two that will focus in on a toolkit, and I'm sure Dr. Madden will share more about that. So we're excited to have her here with us again. And so at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Madden. Thank you.
All right, good morning. It is wonderful to be in the space. I see some familiar faces and names, so yay, coming back for more. I love that. I'm always excited about strategic planning. It's like a superpower, and I'm going to show you how to tap into it to make it really work for you. I just have a couple of ground rules for my sessions. Number one, most important, it's my responsibility that you get the gifts. So if you have a question, you need me to explain something in a different way, you just want to push back on something, anything that you want, this is your space. This is safe space. You can have questions. You can, whatever it is that you need to get this good information, I'm here for it. So again, my responsibility to make sure you get the gifts. Put your voice in the space, put a question in the chat. Um, We'll be monitoring all of that. Unmic yourself and ask a question. What all of that is wonderful. All of us are smarter than one of us, and this is an amazing community, learning community. And I'm really privileged to be in this space to guide you through this process. Okay, so strategic planning is in two parts. This first part, I'm going to give you some of the fundamentals, and I mean fun fundamentals. And then in part two, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use if you're going to try and take on some of this work yourself. If you need to know how to best work with a consultant, I'm going to give you just some amazing tools for your toolbox so that you can really see the power of strategic planning. So with that said, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to first share my screen, and now I'm going to share my slides so we can get moving. All right, slide share here. All right, wonderful. So this is part three in the training, and it's awesome. We've been through the grant writing piece, and today we're on our strategic planning fundamentals. So uh, what I want to deliver today is really, why we want to develop a strategic plan. And there's lots of reasons why, and I'm going to have you put some of those reasons in the chat. But I also want you to know the five components. And these are the steps that I use as a consultant. I only teach the gifts that I use because I know that they work. And I want to walk you through those five steps around strategic planning and show you some really, hot points, just some really powerful points for you to tap into to really guide your pathway forward. And then, I put together a nice to-go box because everybody likes a to-go box. And it's got some tools in there that can help with the strategic planning process. When you see the cloud, it's a chat storm, and I want you to put some answers in the chat and some responses in the chat. And also, when you see the blue star, when you go back through the slides, which you will get, uh, I put some blue stars by the areas I think are important. So that way, as you're paging through, you might want to pause, spend a little more time on those kind of slides. So again, the learning objectives for this session is really to give you some fundamentals around strategic planning, to give you just some key insights on the process, and give you some tips on how to really have a stronger strategic plan, whether you need to create one, you have one that is existing or you're in the midst of, all of that will be very, very helpful. And again, just if you were here last year, maybe if you had some questions that have emerged from the last time you've taken this strategic planning, pop those in the chat. I'm happy to make some connections or fill in some gaps if you have that, if you need that. So here is my first chat storm. So in the chat, does your organization have a current strategic plan? That's my question. And it's simple yes or no, or whatever you want to put in the process or however. So in the chat, does your organization have a current strategic plan? Pop that in And okay, all right, good. All right, some yeses, some no, some maybe, some maybe. And honestly, that I believe so makes a lot of sense because we're going to talk about that. Oh yeah, Marvin, 3-year plan is perfect. Okay, good. All right, wonderful. Kind of. Yep, understand that fully as well. Yes, sometimes we have to build the plane and fly the plane. Yes. Yes. Okay, makes sense. Okay, so we're going to just start with some fundamentals. Why develop a strategic plan? But I'm gonna ground you in a definition from some research that I was a part of. And I love this quote because it's true. Strategic planning builds power and connections with the community served and strengthens organizational credibility and effectiveness. This is why strategic planning is so powerful. Strategic planning can help an organization fulfill their mission. It can help an organization meet requirements. Sometimes you're applying for funding and you need to be able to check that box that says we have a strategic plan. Sometimes you need to satisfy some of your constituents to say, this is the pathway, this is the way that we're going. These are our areas of priority. Oftentimes, a strategic plan can help you create value because you're able to focus and then you're able to prioritize in ways that are very impactful. When you're in the strategic planning process, it is an amazing time where you can set the priorities for the organization, where you can get your stakeholders on the same page. And it also gives you the opportunity to go back and revisit your mission and vision and values. And so it's just a really powerful time for your organization. All right, so here's your first blue star.
Hi.
The thing that's really important about strategic planning is that it's all about the near future. If it's very difficult to try to plan beyond 3 years because the world is so much change. An opportunity could emerge that wasn't available a year ago that is in alignment with what your organization, does and is and wants to be. And maybe that wasn't initially a part of the plan. So we have to think about strategic planning as a living document that we get to tap into. And sometimes when we plan beyond this sort of like 3-year or 5-year at best, it's hard to imagine what we need to put into place. So this focus on the near future is really important for your strategic planning process. Now, if you're like a museum, yes, maybe you can, plan for 10 years. Or if you're a city and you need to issue bonds, 10-year strategic planning makes sense. But in my experience, community-based nonprofit organizations, a focus on the near future gives you great, great insight. The thing that is also important, so important, sometimes when we're doing the strategic planning work, we're just in that big picture strategic planning mode. And it's amazing, right? Here's the vision. These are the things that we want to accomplish. This is like this is the change we want to see in the world. But if you don't anchor that strategic planning to an implementation plan, if they're not connected, then it's difficult to actualize because you just have these sort of like lofty big picture goals, but you don't have an implementation strategy that anchors you to the strategic plan that gives the team on the front line the direction that they need to go. So strategic planning has to tie to an implementation plan or implementation strategy. And in this implementation plan, this is where you have your SMART goals. This is where you're able to look at things in much tighter time frames, like quarterly or monthly. This is where you can see the future with great clarity, 6, 12 months in advance. And then as you're 6 months into the plan, you start planning out the back 6 months of the plan. Like now you're really working your strategic plan through this implementation strategy in a way that works for the organization. And oftentimes when we don't have that connection, that's where we feel like, I know we put in the work. I know we paid somebody to do this strategic plan, but I feel like we've just defaulted back to doing the things we have always done. So if we don't anchor a strategic plan to an implementation strategy, then we default to just go back to doing things how we've always done. We put that strategic plan on the shelf and just do what we know. But when you can have that implementation strategy in place, that's when you can light up the fire of your strategic plan. You also, in this implementation plan, you identify, what departments or who's the point person responsible for this SMART goal to be performed within this time frame. So that when you can tie it to an implementation plan, implementation strategy, that's when your strategic plan is incredibly powerful for you. Also, the strategic plan is super helpful because it can build consensus. There's clarity about the way forward and what we need to do. And then, as a reminder, November 7th, we're going to talk about SMART goals and SMART-T goals and objectives. So you're going to get some really good tools to put in your toolkit to help you with this implementation plan. So I have a chat storm again. If you have a strategic plan or not, doesn't matter if you do or not, if you answered yes, no, maybe, what are the top 2 reasons why you think your organization might need a strategic plan? So in the chat, top 2 reasons why you might need a strategic plan, whether you have one or not. Where are you at in your strategic plan process, and why is it important to you? Why might you need a plan, whether you have one or not? Pop those responses into the chat. Is it just that you need to, be able to tell a funder that your strategic plan is done? I'm going to come out and see what we have in the, okay, good. All right, good. Consensus, excellent. That definitely can happen. Helping spread the vision. Oh yeah, that's powerful. Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Realistic goals. Oh, yes, all of that. Be a organization that's focused. Yes, excellent. Realistic. Yes, excellent. Clear expectations. Yes. Expansion capacity, so spot on, you know. Excellent. How do we do more with the resources that we have? Yes. Propel emissions, consensus, sustainability, these are all spot on. And you see that even the responses are a mixture of the big picture plan, but also the core components in that implementation strategy. So again, the implementation component is really, really important for the work. Okay, good, excellent. All right, this is wonderful. All right, going back, I'm going to share my screen, and now I'm going to go back to sharing my slides. All right. I want to talk about, some benefits to strategic planning. Many we've put in the chat already. And again, maybe you hadn't thought about these, but you can see that they can be powerful for the work that you need to do. Some of the benefits of strategic planning, again, strategic thinking and acting, this ability to connect with key stakeholders. You can really improve your decision-making organization-wide. It allows you to, again, effectively, utilize resources and seeing how they connect to outputs and outcomes. That's a nod to logic modeling, which I'm going to talk about later. Again, number 4, we can think about how people who receive our services are impacted. And we can also create greater awareness about needs in the communities that we serve and gaps. We can also have people involved in the process. I think that this is one of the most underutilized powers of strategic planning, is that it really does give your team the ability to see themselves in the work. When you think about it, we often hear about strategic plan being this top-down approach. One, because it is one of the main responsibilities of the board to ensure that a strategic plan is in place for the organization. So it feels very top-down. But the win in the strategic plan is when you get to engage your frontline, all of your staff, your stakeholders. And when people see themselves in the work, it becomes really impactful, because what people co-create, they sustain. And so engaging your staff in the strategic planning process, engaging your stakeholders in the strategic planning process, they really see themselves in the work, and they feel committed to bringing that strategic plan to fruition. So again, it is really powerful for the people involved in the process. And it can increase morale. It can just get people excited about the future, your team. And again, when you can create a way for your team to see their handprints in the creation of the strategic plan, man, it's a powerful place to go. So, summary, why develop a strategic plan? It can improve performance. It's a way to look at the future. You can deal with major organizational challenges. You can survive, even flourish with less because there's a focus there. It can build this expertise and build the team. It can allow you to influence over being influenced because you have clarity about the things that you want to do and how you want to do those things. And again, to be fair, sometimes we need to get the strategic plans done to meet the requirement of others. So in this first part, I want to pause to see if there are any questions. You put some comments in the chat. You've heard some things. Maybe these are things that you already know. Maybe it's something new that you didn't know. Any questions before I continue to the next piece? Any thoughts, comments, questions? I'm here for all of it.
Hi.
Hey, Mr. Kelly, how are you?
I'm good. You know what? I'm a little late because they sent me another link for another class on November 7th, and I was sitting over there waiting to log in. And I said, wait a minute, this is not happening, right? So now I'm over here with you, but I'm glad to be over here with you.
I'm glad you're here too.
Yeah, because I definitely wanted to hear what you had to say about your strategic planning because I think it's important. And like I said, I just wanted to apologize for being a little late, but that was my mistake. But I know you're going to give a good class and very informative class, so I'm just looking forward to it. And I'll get in there where I fit in a minute, all right?
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming, even if it was a little tardy.
No
Marvin,
problem.
what's your question? Implication does the absence of a strategic plan can have on an organization? So, well, to be truthful, there are many organizations who operate without a strategic plan. But it could really give you the ability to, again, I'll say at its fundamental level, to do more with less when you have a strategic plan. When you don't have a strategic plan, you know what it feels like sometimes? Have you this is an old, if anybody ever seen The Wiz? Like, remember that old, The Wiz version with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson? Remember at the end of The Wiz was like, blue, blue, go, go. Like whatever the color was at the moment, that's like, and I've seen that happen in businesses. I just call it. I'm like, man, this is the Wiz style of management. And so when you don't have a plan in place, you find yourself defaulting to the Wiz style of management. Like, so blue, you just like whatever's shiny, you like, I need that. But when you got a plan, you like, everything ain't for everybody. You want to focus on the things that you want to do to help you get to where it is that you need to be, and your team is with you. They're like, okay, we got focus. We know where we want to go. It's like having a GPS. Who know how to get anywhere without a GPS? I know I don't. My mind is like, don't you got a phone for that? So it's like having a GPS for your organization. That's the power of having a strategic plan. And when you don't have one, sometimes, gas is expensive. So you want to make sure you're getting there the most direct route.
Love it. Love it. Yep. An organization's GPS. Well said. Thank you.
Yes. Good. Excellent. Any other thoughts or questions? Comments? I just want to give you a reason to believe. We know strategic planning is work. And let me tell you the other thing that's important. I've worked with organizations and they're like, okay, we want a strategic plan. We're going to be together next weekend. I was like, what? That's not enough time. What? You can't, like, it's not a one-day event, minimally 3 months. Honestly, the best strategic plans, I know you're going to hate to hear this, but if you got like a little budget, you're going to need 6, 9 months. Honestly, and if you're trying to do it on your own, you got to give yourself the grace of time, because as has been said already this morning, you are flying the plane and building the plane. And when you're doing that, you can't put the pedal to the metal. You got to go slow so that you can really get the things done that you want to. So, you just have to also give yourself the gift of time, especially if you're trying to do some of this work on your own and you're building the plane as you're flying the plane. Okay. Good. I got lots of tools for you that we can help with those things. So Lizette, I challenge you to come to both sessions because I think you're going to get so much out of the sessions. I tried to give you something very practical and applicable that can really be helpful. Yes. All right, Brenda, core values or steps to design the strategy. Okay. All right. So people are already like, let's go. All right, let's get back to the stuff because we got real questions here. All right. I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going back to share my slides. Thank you for those questions. And we will get back to the work. So that brings us to the next questions that were emerging. People ready? is as if they already saw my slides. So the next part in it is really understanding the strategic planning process, because people are like, okay, all right, I'm a believer. All right, yes. So what next? This is what you do. Five steps. Okay, now I'm going to tell you that a couple of steps got a lot of sub steps to it, but in general, 5 steps. But a couple of steps got some short, so stay with me. First step, I just cluster it under this getting organized sort of cluster. So let's break down what is getting organized. What does that mean? The first thing you want to do in the getting organized is that you want to look at any of your previous work. You don't just start from the beginning. You don't just start from scratch. You look at what you've been successful at, what's worked for you, because you don't want to leave any of that behind. You want to continue on a trajectory of things that are working for you. So you want to review your previous work and say, yes to this. Oh, like, that was a crazy idea. Absolutely not to that. So you need to look back so that you can look forward. You also want to think about if you're going to put together a strategic planning committee, and think about what's your approach. What is some critical research that you want to do so that you can make some informed decisions? Who are the stakeholders that you need to involve? And what's the timeline that you want to create for yourselves? Now, the things in orange, I'm going to talk a little more about. And so that's why I've changed their colors so you can see. They're tools for your toolbox. So we'll get there. And then you want to make a decision, or are you going to do any community meetings or convenings? Are you going to just do an electronic survey? Because that's a really good idea to get information from a broader audience. Are you going to do any individual interviews? No, come back. I saw that hand. It's too late. You got to ask that question now. And then you're going to finalize your approach and finalize your surveys, finalize your interview list. Okay, Ahmad, come on. What's the question?
Sure, thank you. So our organization has 5 now, and that's a new achievement. And so thinking for organizations that are 5 and less, even 10 perhaps, in terms of the committee concept, how would that break down or need to be adjusted? Because that's where we find ourselves. We're scaling things that are typically designed, you can tell, for like 10, and in most cases way above that, like 20, 200. So can you help us in terms of those folks who are 5 and less and their smaller groups, how to scale those concepts?
Ahmad, just for clarification, are you saying that you have a team, your staff is 5 people?
Our staff is 5. Yes, we have other types of people who come to help in other ways, stipends and stuff, but
yes, understood, clear.
Okay.
So the beauty about the strategic planning committee is that it doesn't have to be just your staff members. In fact, it makes sense to build a strategic planning committee that includes board, maybe some stakeholders, and a staff person, so that they can huddle on the work regularly and make sure that that the work progresses. Is that your question? And how many, if we have a small team and you're trying to build that strategic planning committee?
That's very helpful. I was curious on any feedback. I love that that's a specific type of, and it's still conceptual, so it's not like do this.
Yeah.
So yes, and anything else in that space of, how do we take this concept and make it fit for what we're doing?
Wonderful. And even if you have a small organization, you have a small team, even if your paid staff is 5 and you have volunteers or you have contractors, you have a board, this strategic planning process, again, engages them, but it doesn't have to feel overwhelming when you have a small team. It just means that you have to consistently meet. So for example, organizations that I work with on the strategic plan, I'll do like a 30-minute huddle every 2 weeks with a core team members of their strategic planning committee. That could be 3 to 5 people typically. And we just do that so we can just check in really quickly. Is there something that we need to do in order to keep the work moving forward? So it doesn't have to feel overwhelming. This is why the timeline is important, so you can ensure that you get the work done without feeling overwhelmed by the strategic plan, because you still have to do the work of the organization. All right. All right, good. All right, understood. Okay, good. Okay. All right, going back, sharing screen, and then going back to share slides. So we're going to talk more about stakeholders because I do realize that that's an important piece. So hang in. In fact, I think that might be next. So I had stakeholders highlighted because I think that that becomes a really important question. Sometimes we think that the staff has to do the strategic planning work, but no, the strategic planning committee, how do we identify stakeholders to assist, can be super, super helpful. So let's toy with that. So a stakeholder, when we first think about stakeholders, sometimes we need to think about who are they and you know, how do we analyze this who they are and how they can be helpful. So as you all know, stakeholder, a person, a group, an organization that can put claim on the organization's resources, attention, output, or is even affected by that output. So we get that as a stakeholder. But I'm here to say that it is also important for you to think about how a stakeholder can influence the organization, thinking about what they need from the organization or how important they are to the organization. And sometimes if we just take a moment, just take a little step back to do a stakeholder analysis, we can really think about, you know, who we need to engage in this process or who we need to be mindful as we're thinking about the future of the organization. So a stakeholder analysis is a really powerful tool. And also remember that a stakeholder can be both internal as well as external to the organization. So why don't you, for example, I want you to think of 2 to 4 stakeholders for your organizations, 2, 3, or 4 stakeholders. Just pop them in the chat. Pop there. They could be, you know, names. It could be, you know, the mayor. It could be the whomever they are, the residents who are. Let's just, I want you to get into the mindset of identifying stakeholders. So think about who the stakeholders are for your organization. All right. All right, good. Okay, excellent. Wonderful. Yes, excellent. Excellent. Yes, these are excellent. Excellent. Perfect. Yes. All right. So the stakeholder identification can be super helpful for you, you know, and I see the cross, you know, across lots of different categories. And so sometimes it's helpful to think through what are some of the categories for stakeholders. Maybe they're, you know, related to the organization. So maybe they're your team, or maybe they're the peer organizations, or maybe there's your employees, or, you know, higher ups. Maybe there's some leaderships or sponsors that can be, you know, the stakeholder. Maybe they're political stakeholders. So it's, you know, elected officials or different associations or competitors, or maybe it's customer focus and clients or constituents or primary or secondary users. So sometimes it's super helpful to think through those different stakeholders. And so I put just a tool, if you needed it, and into a Google Drive. I'm going to stop share just for a second and just share that so you can see, you know, if you want to have this tool thinking about your stakeholders, I put this together for you so you can use it. So let me share this link. Oops. I'm going to pop it into the chat. Just make a copy for yourself. And this will also be in your follow-up materials. And I'm going to share my screen. Sometimes it's helpful to think about your stakeholders. And if you just kind of put them into your, you know, into this Google Drive, it'll then populate to the level of analysis that you need to make. What are some of their expectations, the tangible ones and the intangible ones? Because once you're thinking about who they are, you know, so if we put staff in, it'll populate staff. And now you can think about what are the tangible expectations? You know, they need, you know, lead guidance, you know, and they might need, you know, just support, might be some intangible pieces, but it just allows you to think about what their expectations and needs are so you can be mindful as you're going through this process. So if you populate on this first tab who they are, it'll carry over to the second, and then you can add what are the tangible and intangible expectations and needs. It's just a really good exercise to start you thinking about who are your stakeholders and what are their needs. Because if we don't identify the stakeholders and we don't do a simple analysis about their needs and expectations, then we miss those needs and expectations. But when we just spend a moment thinking and reflecting on them, it's much easier for us to think about how we can meet those needs, or what needs or expectations we can meet, and to think about them from an intangible and a tangible perspective. So I think that that's super helpful. All right, makes sense? Okay, good. All right. I'm going to continue on because I still have some more stakeholders that I want to talk through, because I think it's such an important concept that we forget, because there's so many, resources that we can, and support that we can secure from stakeholders. So I also want you to think about, make sure my screen is sharing. Awesome. I also want you to think about, how do you manage the expectations of your stakeholders? So you can spend some time thinking about their tangible and intangible needs. And then I also want you to think about, how do you manage their expectations? And so one way to really think about this in a strategic way is to map your stakeholders. So if we go back into your chat where you put your stakeholders, you can see how many, where in the quadrant does your stakeholder land, and then so go back into the chat, see what you put, and then maybe identify which quadrant, each of these stakeholders, would land in. Do they have like this low interest but high influence? And this is how you chart them. It's based on influence and interest, or availability. That's another way to think of it. Do they have high availability and high influence? Do they have high availability but low influence? Or do they have low availability and low influence? Then they would go into quadrant 3. If they have low availability and high influence, they would go into quadrant 2. So just identify, one or two of your stakeholders, for example, and just put which quadrant would they be in. Are they, available, quite available, and very influential? Then they would be number 1. If they are, very available, but, they don't have a lot of influence, they would be in quadrant 4. So in the chat, like what number do you see some of your stakeholders in? Are they in quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then pop that into the chat. Low interest, or meaning low availability. Sometimes it, so influence, do they have influence about the future of your organization? Does that make sense about influence? Perfect. Thank you, Angela. Does that make sense? Does this kind of, because if you can put them into a quadrant, then it can give you some insight on how you can manage their expectations. So again, I'm gonna hold on to see if we can get any numbers in the chat. Where would you put any one of your stakeholders? What quadrant would it be in? Okay, we got a 4. Awesome. A 1. Okay, good. And again, you might have each stakeholder might be in a different quadrant, and that's perfectly fine. There's some 2s and some 1s. Excellent. Some 1s, some 2s. Excellent. 4s. Okay, perfect. 2s and 1s. Okay, excellent. And this is why this is important, because if you can map them, if you can put them into the chat, where you think they are, you can see what quadrant that they fall in, and then you can get some insight on how to manage their expectations. So for example, if you had any of your stakeholders in quadrant 1, you give them a 1, you need to actively engage these stakeholders. If you have any of your stakeholders that landed in quadrant 2, you need to keep these stakeholders satisfied. If you have any of your stakeholders that landed in quadrant 3, you need to just keep an eye on these stakeholders. And if you have any of your stakeholders that landed in quadrant 4, you just need to keep them informed. So this also gives you a way, because it's hard to meet the needs of every stakeholder. But if you have an approach that you can take based upon where the stakeholder lands, it just allows you to do more with less, you know? All right, good. Any questions before I move to this final thing I want you to understand about stakeholders? Does that matrix make sense as a way, as an approach to help you manage your stakeholders? Because, you know, we know that in this work that we do, this passion work, this mission work, there's never enough time, talent, or treasure. So if we can get some insight on how we can be impactful in our work, it's super helpful. So this is how we're infusing strategy into our strategic planning work, you know? So if we can at least start to group some of our key stakeholders and we know how to effectively, you know, support them, this helps you to be impactful into your work. Again, do more with less to thrive, even when you don't have, immense budgets. Make sense? Any questions or anything like this before I move forward? Okay, excellent.
Yeah, my mic on?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Kelly.
yeah, no, I was thinking along those lines because I was thinking about, we just did an event and a lot of times we have the mayor come out, right?
Mhm.
And they also sponsor us to a point. And I just think that, I mean, they're actively engaged. I
Yes.
just get them more financially engaged. So,
Amen. Right? Mm-hmm.
and I think we're working toward that point that when you get them actively engaged,
Yes.
you can come to them for CBDG grants or
Yes.
or-
Absolutely.
or
They'll
have-
start thinking of you. They're like,
Yeah.
wait, oh, we know what this organization does. Let's call Mr. Kelly because this will be a good fit for him.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
You're on the
Yeah.
right track. Keep that up.
I'm
Okay.
gonna keep that up.
All right. All right. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to share my slides. I want to do one more thing on the stakeholder piece because I just think it's such a good way to get a lot from, just a simple analysis.
One last question on that.
Yes. Mhm.
Would the grant maker also be considered a stakeholder?
Absolutely. Yes. And maybe they don't have a lot of availability, but they have high influence. So maybe they go in the keep satisfied bucket, you know?
Okay.
Mhm.
What else do you want
And
me to do?
that makes sense because they want their reports. They want you to do the work you said you was gonna do when you was getting this money. So you want to keep them satisfied. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm done.
Okay. You don't have to be.
No, I just said, because I was thinking about it because they were, like a lot of times the grant makers, they, we do, we take pictures and all that while we're at the
Excellent.
event. And even though, we have to give releases and stuff like that, we try
Yes.
to send it to them as much as we can.
Oh, okay. I'm going to pick up on that plan. So yes, let's just say that's absolutely right. That makes a lot of sense. You decided that your grant maker doesn't have a lot of availability, but definitely high influence. You want to keep them satisfied, give them lots of report and rich information. But here's the beautiful thing. Who else is in that keep satisfied quadrant? Because you should also send that information to those stakeholders because that's another way to keep them satisfied as well. So now you're prepping in a way, and then you're leveraging the work that you're doing to benefit more stakeholders than just the one. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so this is the last piece I want you to think about on the stakeholder piece. I want you to also think about the importance and the positioning of a stakeholder. And so I know this feels really weird, but just trust the process for 1 minute. So if we think about on a scale from -5 to +5, if we think about their position or if their support of a program or a project, the stakeholder is, I want you to think about what is their number from -5 to 5 on your project, your organization. What is their position, right? And then I want you to think about that same stakeholder, and I want you to think about what is the importance of that stakeholder, and you rate that on a scale from 1 to 10. So again, identify the stakeholder, think about their position from -5 to +5, And then on a scale from 1 to 10, you can rate their importance. And so in the deck, you're going to get a little, template, a little kind of sheet table that you can write down the stakeholders and then rate their position or support of your organization of a project that you're doing, -5 to 5, and then the importance of the stakeholder on a scale from 1 to 10. I haven't figured out how to get the Excel sheet to map it for me, so I don't have a Google sheet for you, but I will work on that. I might have to send that one to Fiverr. So the idea is what you do is when you can put your stakeholder down, list them, and then position them from -5 to 5 on 1 to 10, that you'll get these quadrants. So in my example, I have residents as a stakeholder. Their position or their support of the project is a 4 out of 5, and their importance of the stakeholder is 6 out of 10. The library, maybe they're not as supportive of the project, so they're a -2. But they're not as important, so they're just a 3. But the mayor, maybe the mayor is like, yeah, I don't know, we haven't done a good job like Mr. Kelly has done of keeping the city up to date on what we're doing. So maybe it's a -1, but the mayor is very important in the stakeholder because he got these CDBG dollars and all these other resources. So maybe that's a 9. So if we can sort of chart these things, and so here is the chart, for example, and you'll have this stakeholder position 5 to -5, stakeholder important 0 to 10. If we plot the stakeholder, so for example, remember the resident was 4, +4 and 6, so they would go here. The library was -2 and then 3, so they would go here. And the mayor was -1 and a 9, so they would go here. And so you can then plot your stakeholders, and then you get a sense of how they stand. So the insight that you can get from plotting your stakeholders is that you know that the library, given its positioning and its importance, could be problematic. Even though they are only a 3 as far as stakeholder importance, they could still be a problem. The mayor could potentially be a little antagonistic because the negative issue and the importance of the issue or the program. The resident is going to be your advocate because of the importance of the issue and the importance of the stakeholder. And so when you can map out this position and importance on your programs or your organization, you can then build strategies on how you move, for example, a problematic stakeholder into a low priority stakeholder, or an antagonistic stakeholder into an advocate stakeholder. So it's things like, as Mr. Kelly said, okay, if the city could potentially be antagonistic, I need to build some greater awareness, build some better connections. I need to let them know the power of what we're doing at my organization, so they can be more supportive of the position, and I can move them from antagonistic to advocate. But again, all we're doing is we're trying to build strategy into our work. And so when we can build the stakeholder strategy, it gives us a better sense of how we can move people into our advocacy quadrant, or if people understand what our work is or what impact we're having as an organization. Are we telling our story good enough so people know what it is that we're doing? Or are we just so deep in the work that we're just focused on the work and people don't have a good understanding of the impact that we're having in the communities that we serve? This is an important part of your strategic planning process. But if we don't take the time to analyze some of this, we lose the opportunity to think about how we chart the pathway forward. So I'm going to take a pause, and this wraps up our stakeholder stuff. And I just want to see if these tools make sense for you to think about ways that you can, again, be more impactful and, just do more with less. This exercise can be done with your staff, with your board and staff. You can do this on your own. It's just some super useful, techniques to help you think strategically about a way forward. Okay, good. Other thoughts or comments? Awesome, good. Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, let's keep it moving. All right, I'm going to share because we still technically over step 1, but we're going to get there. All right, sharing my screen, and I'm going back to sharing my slides, which you will get. The next thing that's in your toolbox are survey resources, because honestly, doing a simple survey in the strategic planning time is really, really important. So, SurveyMonkey, the first 10 questions are free. Google Forms, another excellent resource. If you use Google, super, super easy. JotForm is another tool. If you need something a little more secure, Typeform is another survey resource. And then I always get this off. I'm already anticipating what your next question is going to be. What should the survey question ask? So these are some real questions from clients. You keep a survey simple. What is the greatest barrier from getting your population housed? This is from an actual client. How can we amplify your voice? How can we help share the success of your organization? Those were things that were important to this organization, and that's the things that they asked for in the survey. Simple. You might decide you want to take a different approach. Here's another actual survey question. It's February 2027, 3 years from now. If we have exceeded your expectations, what have we achieved? The next question, what 3 critical issues must we make a priority in order to, whatever your core mission is, in whatever your target geography is or community? Number 3, what deliverables or measures, up to 3, should we be accountable for that demonstrates added value in reducing or sustaining whatever it is your key goal is in whatever it is the city that you're operating is in? Simple, straightforward questions so you can get this information, this data, and make informed decisions about the future of your organization. Let those, put that at the bottom of you're in the midst of the strategic planning process. Minimum 3 months. Put that on your website. Put it at the bottom of your signature in your emails. We're in the middle of our strategic planning process. Please respond to this survey. Maybe have some paper copies at events, or put together a QR code that, stakeholders, community residents who can respond to, because you're getting this information and now you can use that information to make some informed decisions around. So that becomes really important. All right, good. Yeah, I think that you can make the decision that it changes, but honestly, by keeping the questions simple, by keeping the questions the same, you can really look at the broad swath of answers, and then and that can be super helpful. But you may decide that you want to get different questions to different stakeholders, and so that means you need to have different surveys. So survey A, B, C. And so sometimes there's some complexity there versus asking everybody the same set of questions. So it's up to you, whatever works for you. Okay, sharing my screen. And now I'm going to go back and share my slides. All right. The next piece, I fully recommend the survey because it allows you to get lots of answers, lots of responses, but also important, you might identify a couple of individual interviews to conduct during this process. And so honestly, this is like a secret weapon. Your people, you make the call and you're like, I'm in the midst of a strategic planning process. Can I take 15 minutes for a quick interview? Because it's going to inform us about how we move forward. It's a way to plant a seed. And that way you can come back later and cultivate that seed. And, this could be with potential collaborators. This could be with potential funders. It's just such a powerful way to open the door, get a little crack in the door, plant a little seed so that later you can come back and cultivate that seed, right? Simple interview questions. I use these all the time, because you want the conversation to take the trajectory that it's supposed to take. So it really, I think, Lizette, that what you really was asking about was this individual interview piece, because these questions are very open and it allows the person that you're having an interview with to tell you the things that you need to know in ways that matter to them. So I think that you might have the survey stay the same, but the interview can just take the direction that it needs to take, as you're conducting it. And so I always recommend, and what I use myself is just simple framing questions. From your perspective, what do you think are the key strengths of your organization? What are some real opportunities? Is there opportunities for collaboration, or if you're working with that organization already, what are some ways that we can continue to work together? And then the why question. And then the probes, because really you're listening here. You want to make sure that you understand. So you might say more about that, or maybe you say, can you think of a time because the storytelling gives you just like a richness of discussion, and and just feel free to ask for, did I hear you say, or because you want to make sure that you're capturing what that person is saying, not your interpretation of what that person is saying. So the individual interviews can be really powerful. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to just come off really quickly and just say that, it may be that you don't use any of this information. It could be that. It could be that you're like, this confirms we're on the right trajectory, or this was such a weird response. The power of being asked, that is the most important thing, that people felt like they were given the opportunity to give their insight and advice about your organization. You've given them the opportunity to co-create. And remember, what people co-create, they sustain. So when you give them the chance to respond to a survey or participate in an interview, you are asking them to help you co-create. You may not get information that is useful for you, but the most important part is that you have asked the question. People get the opportunity to feel heard, and that's powerful. That's the superpower in strategic planning. All right. I'm going to keep going. All right. Yay. All right. Sharing my screen, and then I'm going back to share my slides. All right. Step 2, taking stock. Now, this is typically when people talk about strategic plan, they jump right into this part. This is what they think about. And this is important. But even this, I don't believe is being done correctly. So let's just talk about it. Taking stock, it's all about the visioning. Yes, what is the vision for the future? And then we also look at what is our mission, what the organization is created to do, what are our mandates, what the organization is required to do, who are our stakeholders, and what is the organization expected to do for who. And so this is a powerful part of strategic planning. This is the part that we know. Then we do the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Often the strengths and weaknesses are the things internal to the organization, and the opportunities and threats are the things external to the organization. We're going to talk more about SWOT analysis. I'm going to give you some great tips and techniques next time. So make sure you sign up for the toolkit, because I'm going to give you some good stuff. And then the steps. When you're doing a SWOT analysis to fidelity, these are all of the components, And when you're doing the taking stock, you also want to do the research, because we know that the stories are really, really important. I mean, the storytelling, very powerful. We know the qualitative information is impactful, but we also need to tell our story quantitatively through the numbers. We have to be able to deliver this work quantitatively and qualitatively, because we don't know where it's landing, and we can potentially, inspire through the numbers as well as the story. So we have to provide them both, and so having this insight on research is really, really powerful, because we want to demonstrate an evidence-based solution that can help the organization to thrive. And so again, I talked about this in the grant writing session, that data.census.gov. Oh man, it's amazing information that you can get about the area that you're trying to serve. You can put that research into your work, and you're demonstrating that you're moving in this direction based upon data. That's very powerful. Also, in the taking stock step, we're looking at a market assessment. What's happening? We're looking at the market and the constituents. Who are our stakeholders? What are their needs? What are some emerging trends external to the organization? There are some tools that can be very helpful for us to do this work. One that I like particularly is a pest analysis, and we're going to talk about that on November 7th so that you can have a good understanding of some of these tools and how you use the tools. All right. All right, then we're going to look at the organizational assessment. This is another important piece. What are the things that the organization needs to bolster? Is it operations? Is it staff development or volunteer management? Is it programmatically? Is it the marketing and the messaging? Is it our engagement? Is it our budgeting? Is it our fundraising? In the chat, where do you think your pain point is? When you think about this organizational assessment, where do you think your pain point is? Is it in the operation? Is it in the program? Is it in the marketing? Is it in the fundraising? You know, and again, in the strategic planning work, we need to take the time to understand where our strengths are and where it is that we need to bolster, you know, organizationally. All right. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Capacity, marketing. Oh man, marketing, that totally makes sense. You will not be alone, you know. Okay, good. All right. I love that. Good. All right. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Step 3. Any questions on that second step before we move to step 3? I'll stop sharing for a second. Good. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. Wonderful. Sharing my screen. And going back to sharing my slides. So step 3 is all about developing a strategy. Now, you've spent a lot of time gathering information. You've done a survey, you've maybe done some interviews, maybe you had a focus group, maybe you did the community convening, and you need to sit with this information so that you can start to put together a strategy. And so I like the use of a logic model. Sometimes organizations prefer a work plan, you know, but when you have this tool in place, this is how you can get yourself to implementation strategy. So we're also going to talk about logic models. I should have put logic models on November 7th as well. So when you can put a logic model or work plan in place, you're really putting a sustainable system in place. You can look at what's needed and you can build on where you are to where it is that you want to be. And so that becomes a really, really powerful way to get the work done. And then you can move to step 4, which is drafting and refining the strategic plan. Now, this one's simple. It just means that you need to put it together, sit with it, iterate it, and then continue to move forward. People think that you could just sit down and knock out that strategic plan and you're done. No, there's something powerful about the iteration. You need to look at it and you're like, okay, this makes sense. No, we need to move this a little bit. No, we need to better understand this. And then you give it another rotation. It's like good soup. It needs to like marinate and you need to think about it and then see where you need to bolster something. So there's this iterative process that happens as you're drafting and refining the strategic plan if you're trying to do good work. And then the 5th step is just implement the plan and monitor the performance. And so again, the strategic plan includes your implementation strategies. You got your SMART goals. You got your timelines outlined. You know what deliverables are in place. You know, you can transition as you need to. And so that becomes the work of the plan. You have your strategic plan in place. You have your implementation strategy in place. And you get to plan the work and work the plan. And it becomes a really powerful way to do the strategic planning work. All right, questions. I'm going to stop share, see if there's any questions. Five steps, honestly, when we're thinking about the strategic planning process. Lots of components in those steps, but when you can group them in those areas, it really can be helpful for you thinking through the strategic planning process.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes.
When you're doing the strategic planning,
Mhm.
You got all those people in place that you're talking about, stakeholders wise and staff and all those people.
Mhm.
What happens when you lose some of those people?
That's a wonderful questions, right? Because this is happens, this is nature of the work, you know. It their voice is in the plan, but it doesn't mean that you need to pivot because you lost a player. And that's why when we think about, for example, when you go through the SWOT analysis, and I'm going to walk you through what that is next time, you're thinking about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You're building on the strengths of the organization. Now, the if you've built your plan on the strengths of a single person in that organization, then that's going to be a problem. And I don't, and this is why we do the SWOT analysis so that we can see, is this a strength of the organization? Is this a desire of the organization, or are we basing this on the skills and ability of a single person? And then that becomes a threat. It becomes, okay, well, what happens, or weakness, for example, towards the organization? What happens if this person decides to go? And so if we know that it's a weakness, we know that this is a strength because this makes sense of what we do. We have the capacity on our staff to do it, but it's a weakness because all of this capacity is tied to one person. Then maybe part of the strategic plan is to bolster this focus area. And so it's all about identifying who might else be willing to, support this work. For example, could we do some of this work, some of this important work that we've anchored on this one person? Could we find some collaborative partners to work with so we're not at risk? But if we don't take the time to do the SWOT analysis, then we don't have insight on how we can mitigate some of those risks. So that's the power of the reflection. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Because what happens is a lot of times we find ourselves as founders,
Mhm.
we taking the whole enchilada. It's like,
Yes.
it's us, and then we look around and get sick or something, and there's nobody going, who's going to throw the ball to, right?
Yes.
And there, we didn't plan for that person, the down person
Yes.
to hand the ball to say, you carry the ball now.
Yeah, that's fair, because this might emerge in your strategic planning that you need a succession plan in place, or at least the thoughts of it, a contingency strategy. But that's the power of giving yourself the time to reflect and look backwards and forward, so that you can think about how you plan for that future that you want to bring to fruition.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's good. Good.
Thank you. Yes. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Was wondering, in the last comments that you just made, when would be the best time for smaller organizations? I know different organizations at different sizes. When is the optimal time for an organization to start their strategic planning if they're, a founder with, maybe one staff member, or versus when you're a team of 5 or 10? When's the best opportunity for them to start thinking about it?
Yeah. I love that question. It's good to hear your voice, Dr. Shinshuri. And I think that, one strategy is this. If you have a small organization, small team, maybe you think about when is your least busy time of the year. So maybe you do a lot of work in the summertime. You have heavy summer programming. So then maybe you have like a lull in your schedule, in the early fall. Kids are going back to school. You have, there's some things that, and so maybe you want to think about, we're going to start that strategic planning work when we have some time to really devote to it, because all organizations, no matter what size, need some strategic planning. It's just extremely helpful. But because we're so busy, sometimes the different approach could be, when in our schedules could we find some time to really devote to, creating the future for the organization? So maybe that little tweak in the thinking can help you schedule the time to think about planning for the future. And then once you spend some intensive time thinking about that, then you can just regularly calendar little bits of time so that you can continue to move the process forward. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I was trying to, the reason why I was asking that question is because we're in a growth spurt and we're trying to evolve our program into other counties.
Nice.
And we go to another county, it's going to be a smaller office, you know. Was just wondering, with the plan that we have, how do we make the adjustment to account for having a smaller team in another location as opposed to, you know, how we would handle that. So I actually signed up for your
Okay, good.
for your coaching. So I'm gonna be able to talk to you about that.
Okay, I'm ready for you.
Okay,
Okay. All right, excellent.
thank you.
You're welcome. Well, then I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share my slides because my next question is, what are you going to do in the next 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months? And if you sign up for a coaching session, I think that that's a powerful thing that you can do, you know, it just within the next 3 days, pick a time, and that time can be weeks advance or what have you. But I'm happy to help you think very strategically through what your own organization needs. And if, again, taking this information, what can you do with this information in the next 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months that really helps move your organization forward? And then I just want to talk a little bit about what I've put into your to-go box so that you know what that is. But again, November 7th, we're going to do the toolkit. I think that's going to be super important. I love a toolkit because I think of myself as a third generation builder. My dad was a sheet metal worker. He always get mad because I would say HVAC. Don't let make sheet metal workers matter. And my grandfather was in the construction business too. But I think of myself as a builder, and this is one of my favorite words from my doctoral program, bricolage. Bricolage is the ability to create something from nothing. And all of you practice bricolage in your work. And people who practice bricolage are called bricoleurs. So all of us are bricoleurs, practicing bricolage, creating something from nothing. And so I want you to see yourself as well as a builder and a bricoleur. So in your to-go box, I put a couple of things that I think could be very helpful. Some definitions, you know, a little worksheet, you know, a little graphic and some information about logic models because I love a logic model. All right, so I put in some definitions around vision, mission, values, and goals because sometimes we're like, wait, what's the difference between the vision and the mission? So just so you have it, vision is what success looks like for your organization, what the world will look like if you've accomplished your mission. Mission, this is your 2x4. This is why your reason exists. It's the visible, tangible effect that you want to create for your customers, your clients, your residents, you know, and the world. The values, your values are your shared set of beliefs that help determine organizational culture. And then your goals are your long and intermediate and short-term steps that get carried out every day, every week, every month, every quarter, yearly. These are the things that help you get to your implementation strategy that anchors to your strategic plan. The other thing for those of you who have strategic plans or are thinking about them, is just a simple sheet that tells you, you know, when it comes to a particular topic area, red light, no, this is a no. Yellow light, but this black, because I didn't think yellow would show up, would be here. And then the green light, that's where you want to be. So when it comes to data, if you only have opinions and perceptions, red light, you know, proceed with caution. When it comes to data, when you're just using ad hoc data or you're just putting raw lists and charts in your you know, plan, you know, that's better than having opinions, but it's not especially helpful. A green light when it comes to data is that you have meaningful and compelling data that you've synthesized. That's powerful. When it comes to focus, if you're only externally focused, that's a red light. If you're only internally focused, okay, that's better, but it still doesn't get you there. A green light is you have a strategic blend of internal and external focus. So that's what this chart does. It gives you all these different topic areas. It gives you a red light, a yellow light, and a green light to give you some insight on your strategic planning. And also in the toolbox, just some insight on logic models. There's a lot of talk about logic models. There's a lot of use of logic models. And I love a logic model. And a logic model, again, this builds from the Kellogg work. I just think of it here. If you have these resources, you could do these particular activities. So when you have these resources, you can do these activities. And then that's, again, your planned work. And then from those activities, you can have these specific outputs. Outputs are like numbers of things. And if you have these outputs, you can have these outcomes. And outcomes are increases or decreases in something or percentage changes. And if you have these outcomes, you can have this impact. And the impact is the big picture change, the fundamental change. And so again, I love a logic model because it's like a visual representation of a pathway. It's the diagram helps you look at where you are and takes you to where it is that you want to be from start to finish. It allows you to see if you have any gaps in your logic. It helps you to understand what resources you need to design a specific program. It also can help you with implementation of your program. This is a great tool to build your implementation strategy from. It can help on the evaluation side, and you can use your logic model to, communicate your goals and objectives and your big picture strategy. You can use it to sequence. You could use it to, clarify any assumptions, make sure people are on the same page, to really think about additional resources that might be needed. And logic models, they align very, very nicely with strategic planning because it allows you to prioritize. It allows you to think about how all of the things fit together. It allows you to get your stakeholders on the same page. It allows for course correction. You can start anywhere in the logic model and move forwards or backwards. And so it's extremely flexible. And honestly, there are lots of uses for the logic models, of course, for strategic planning, a way to maximize your resources, a way to get stakeholder input, a way to communicate externally and internally. You can use it for evaluations and you can use it to raise funds. It's such a good thing. And I have to tell you, the reason that organizations don't love logic models the way I do is because they get these three things mixed up. Outputs, and this is how I simplify them. Outputs is the numbers of things, the units of activities. This is a direct result of your activities, the outputs, numbers of things. Outcomes is what's different as a result of those outputs. What changed as a result of those outputs? And then the impact, that's the big picture change, the fundamental result. So an oversimplified example. So if you're an organization and the thing that I like to advise is that you start in the things that you know, which is typically activities. So I always say start with activities. So let's just say you organize block clubs. That's one of the things that you do as an organization. So when you go from this activity and you move forward to outputs, and remember, outputs are numbers of things. So your activity, I'm organizing block clubs. So then if I move forward in a logic model, and I'm saying, okay, the outputs would be, okay, 6 block clubs get created, numbers of things. See, activity, organizing block clubs, outputs, numbers of things, 6 block clubs created. Now, outcomes are what's changed as a result of your output. So you created these 6 block clubs. What's different because of that? Well, because we got these 6 block clubs, I've seen an increase in civic engagement. Okay, well, that makes sense because you got 6 new block clubs, different parts of the community meeting regularly, having these discussions. Yeah, it would make sense that you would increase civic engagement. You also were able to increase awareness about the different activities happening in the community because you got these 6 block clubs created. They're meeting regularly, exchanging ideas. It would make sense that the outcomes from that output would be increased awareness about different things happening. And when you can increase civic engagement and increase awareness, well, you're bringing forward your fundamental change. You're building a community that is starting to thrive, and residents are engaged in building that community. All right, so now we need to go forward in the logic model. So we go back to activities because we need to identify resources. If we wanted to organize block clubs, if that's the activity that we wanted to undertake, well, what resources would we need? Well, we might need residents. That makes a lot of sense. We might need a community organizer as well. Okay, so if we had residents and a community organizer resources, we could do this activity, organize block clubs. We can have this output, 6 block clubs created. We can have this outcome, increasing civic engagement, increasing awareness about different activities. And this impact would be building this thriving community that's really engaged in rebuilding their neighborhood. So what other activity might we have? Well, in addition to organizing block clubs, we want to have large-scale community meetings. Okay, let's move backwards in the model. So we already have residents and a community organizer. Maybe we need some volunteers. Maybe we need some supplies in order to pull off a community meeting. But more importantly, maybe we need a community center or a Zoom room in order to hold this community meeting. And then let's move forward. If we have residents, an organizer, volunteers, supplies, community center, we're building the activity, we have the resources necessary to do community meetings. What's our outputs? Outputs are numbers of things. So maybe we do 12 community meetings once a month. And when we do that, we can build neighborhood connections. And we can also increase awareness about, how an engagement of the resources available citywide. And when we can do those things, we're building our fundamental change, our fundamental impact. Now, the way that this could be used as an evaluation tool, you could say, you know what, 12 community meetings was too much. Nobody came in December, nobody came in July. We should really just do 10. So you can use this as an evaluation tool to help you to, make changes off of what you propose. And then also the logic model can help you to build your implementation plan. So here's a simplified example of this actual strategic plan, this community health initiative. Here's a part of the logic model. And you can see the activities, develop communication ideas that emerge from the community meeting, gain input from and support from key stakeholders. So here's the full logic model. And now you can take those activities that are listed in the logic model and start to build a timeline for it. And so now you're starting to chart your pathway forward, and building an implementation plan. And this becomes powerful work. Here's another actual example from another organization. I just took a snippet of the logic model. So here you have your resources, you have your activities. In this example, I clustered the activities. So there was a cluster of activities under marketing, outreach, and recruiting. There's a cluster of activities under the urban farm and kitchen incubator, and then you can see how it connects to the outputs. So the numbers of things. So here's just a snapshot, even though I know you can't read it. And then in your toolbox, you'll see that there's just a simple diagram for you to build from so that you can start to build your own logic model, start playing around with the tool. And again, if you focus anchor activities to outputs, it will help you in your process. So that's what the to-go box is, and I will see you on November 7th for the toolkit. And I just have just a few more minutes in the session to answer any questions that you could have, that you might have.
As always, a great presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Looking forward to November 6th.
All right. I'll look forward to seeing you as well. Thank you all. Yay. Okay, Shira, back to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Madden, for a wonderful webinar today. Just sharing that the link to sign up for coaching is in the chat, as well as to register for the Strategic Planning Toolkit webinar. We will be sharing the recording and materials from this presentation, and also the resources for a toolkit via email as well. So hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next time.